Hi, I'm going to be talking about the Renaissance and how it changed art. So, art before the Renaissance in European culture was mostly for the church, and a lot of the art focused on the idea rather than focusing on the details and being realistic. And all the art lacked depth and detail and lighting, and it was more suggestive than realistic. And pre Renaissance artists typically did not get famous. They mostly just did stuff for the church. It wasn't common for them to sort of have famous art to their name. They were sort of just doing the Lord's work at the time. So they didn't really do commissions. It wasn't like it is nowadays. The shift in art started to begin in Europe during the Renaissance when the Catholic Church started becoming corrupt. So Europeans started seeking God independent of the church. So there was an increased sense of individualism at the time. Europe also began rebuilding the civilization from ancient Greek and Romans. So they took some of the art from that time, and that shifted the style of art as well. And people also began to believe that there didn't have to always be a Bible lesson to explain humans, and this also resulted from the increased individualism at the time. So because of all these changes that shift the art over, at the time, art became a commodity. The rich often had it, and it was a symbol of them being rich and having status. So it was for more than just the church. Art became centered on people, and this included nudes that resulted from the Greek and Roman impact on their culture during the Renaissance. Art became more realistic. It paid attention to lighting, symmetry, depth, and architecture. As you can see in the picture on the right, as opposed to the picture you saw earlier, there's a lot more detail on the face. There's depth. You can sort of see the room looking more 3D rather than a flat picture. There's extreme detail on the clothing, in the faces, and the animals. And there's not necessarily a religious theme behind this picture as well, which brings me to the next point of how art changed. Art became very secular. There were still some biblical themes, but it was also used for purposes other than for the church. One of the biblical themes that was included was David and Goliath and several other stories, but sometimes these were used for political reasons, like for subtly offending people in very high power. Some other art themes that were secular included things like ancient mythology. And then in the Renaissance, artists became celebrities, and they got paid for their work different because it wasn't just for the church. And they started to be credited with their work as opposed to just doing the work of the Lord and just doing it for the church. And in modern days, we also sort of see the result of this Renaissance changing the art. We have famous artists now who are credited to their work, and we do art for more than just religious purposes. We do it for personal purposes, to make statements, for personal financial gain, and things like that. Art by famous artists are still a commodity for the rich, and that happened as a result of the Renaissance. Art has a variety of themes now besides religious themes, including political, moral, and symbolic real-life parallels. Now I'm going to sort of go over the how, sort of tying everything together and explaining how the Renaissance caused all these changes. So if the European Church of the Renaissance had not experienced the changes that it did and the unrest that it experienced, art may still have exclusively biblical themes. Because of the increased sense of individualism and focused on people, not just God and everything they did, art became full of other themes and other purposes, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise. If art had never become a commodity at the time of the Renaissance, and something used for entertainment and other purposes, a profession as an artist may not be as realistic today. Art may still be something not valued in the rich world. An artist may not be somebody that's famous, that get paid a lot for their work, that accept commissions. And if you trace all the way back to that time, you can see that's where it started, so you know it made an impact. And individualism was relatively new. in European culture at the time of the Renaissance. And we still see a lot of individualism today, but we can sort of track it back to that time. So that also proves how much of an impact the Renaissance had on both culture and art, but we're talking mostly about art in this case. That's basically everything. Here are my sources for my images and for my information. Thanks for listening.